ready to go.
All right. Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. This is Tuesday, July 12th, and this is a joint work session between the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee and the Oregon City Commission. And I would like to ask Mr. Jacob Wiley to call the roll.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Adam Morrow.
Here.
And Commission President Denise McGriff.
Present.
For PRAC, Committee Member Tim West is absent. Committee Member Ken Worcester is absent. Committee Member Steve Williams.
Yes, here.
Committee Member Joseph Knauf.
Here.
Committee Member Andy Crump.
Here.
Committee Member Brent Haverkamp is absent. Chair Troy Bollinger.
Here.
All right.
And for the record, Commissioner O'Donnell is
Excused. Yes. Well, tonight we have an exciting topic on the agenda, a topic that we all know well, and we're going to talk about it yet again because it's very important to the well-being and livability of our community. And I would like to turn this over to Mr. Kendall Reed.
Thank you. City Commissioners and PRAC, we're very excited to be here. As you know, the Parks and Recreation Department kicked off this Clackamas Park Master Plan back in December of 2020 with
So you might have to back off of it a little bit. We have to tell James to get closer, but I think you need to go back.
I want to make sure you hear me.
We just can't win.
I project too much. But we kicked off our Parks, Clackamas Park Master Plan back in December 2020 with Lango Hansen Landscape Architects. During that time, we've done 3 public engagement meetings. We've done numerous stakeholder interviews. We've done 2 surveys where we've had almost 1,000 people participate in those surveys. And tonight we're doing our second joint work session with PRAC and the City Commission. So tonight we're going to be presenting a plan that's a culmination of all the feedback that we received from those meetings and those interviews. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Brian and Kurt.
Thank you, Kendall. My name is Brian Martin, and I'm with Lango Hansen Landscape Architects, and we're joined virtually by Kurt Lango with Lango Hansen Landscape Architects and Hans Hadley of West Engineering. And as Kendall mentioned, we've had the pleasure of working on this since December with the Parks Department and looking forward to sharing with you. So thank you very much for attending tonight, and we look forward to your feedback. We'd like to briefly walk through the 3 site plan options that we discussed at our last meeting, just to bring everybody back up to speed. Won't spend too much time on that. Touch base on the public survey, the second public survey. We received some really good feedback through that I think is worth sharing. And then dive right into the refined master plan to share with you, and then open it up for questions, comments, and all feedback is welcome. So on the screen is site plan option 1 that we showed before. And just briefly, what this does is, in essence, kept a lot of the site circulation in a similar layout to the existing conditions. Big move would be to move the RV park out of the floodplain and into the lot adjacent on the east side of Clackamas Drive. And it shares half that lot with overflow parking. Organized some parking headed towards the west, towards the Willamette River. Located the boat ramp 350 feet downstream of the existing launch, and expanded the skate park. Moving to option 2, what we did was formalize the main entry as a T intersection, a 3-way stop there, enter the park, some auto parking, transitions into a combination of boat parking, then more automobile parking. Shown in orange are a couple of public plaza spaces there. Play area shown in the centrally located. It took some time to carve out some space near the Willamette and a boardwalk going over.
Can you use the thing?
Oh, you bet.
I mean, I know what you're talking about, but maybe not everybody does. So.
It actually doesn't show up on the white.
If you can just explain it to me, I can point to it with them.
He'll use the hand.
Okay. So Yes, number 10 there is the boardwalk that goes out near the Willamette with some of the earth carved away, creating more of a riparian habitat there. This option also shows the boat ramp being 350 feet downstream based on the report conducted in 2015. And this third plan is perhaps the most divergent in terms of the parking and the play area. There is no boat ramp in this option. The lot across Clackamas Drive is dedicated entirely to RV usage there. And this option incorporates a sport court and an expanded skate park and a centrally located play area. And one thing to mention with all of these plans is just the reorganization of the path structure, much more meandering and intentional and looped pathways through the park. As I mentioned, we conducted 2 public surveys and got some really good feedback. Almost 500 people responded to them on both occasions. And we really wanted to get the public's input on how to improve Clackamas Park, how do they use it today, and how would they use it in the future? And the second survey got a bit more specific in some of the points that we touched on. So I'll just real quickly go through a few of the more pertinent questions. This first question deals with active sport courts within the park. Should that be a part of the master plan? Pretty even split between those who would like to see that in the park and then those who answered no. This next asks the public about gathering spaces within Clackamas Park. Pretty favorable response to having public plaza spaces within Clackamas Park. This next question touches on the wave condition that has naturally occurred at the end of the closed boat launch, and whether that should be kept in place as is, shown in green, whether it should be additional seating added and enhanced, shown in blue, or whether it should be removed and restored as native habitat, shown in the kind of orange color there. So fairly even split throughout. This next question touches on the whether or not there should be a boat ramp within Clackamas Park. And starting at the top in green, the strongly support, and then blue is support, and then moving down opposed or strongly opposed. So there's, of the 400 and almost 50 people that responded, a very strong support for providing a boat ramp within Clackamas Park. This next one touches on how the lot across the street could be developed in terms of how much of it should be dedicated to RV usage. Half of it shown in green, no RV shown in blue, and then in that orange color is the full lot being used as RV park.
Did anybody say did they write in what the other was on that particular question? Are you aware?
I don't recall. I could go back and look at that.
I mean, it's pretty small, but obviously there was something in there.
Yeah, just maybe 2 or 3% there. But yeah, I'm not sure if they had other ideas. The first thing that comes to mind is maintain it as it currently is, just overflow and lay down space for events and that kind of thing. So this next slide, we're going to move on to the refined master plan. And this is the overall plan here, which I'll explain in a minute. And then the following slides will zoom into key areas around the site. And I guess just to set the stage, this is a master plan, and with such, it shows a certain level of development. But moving forward, definitely, this process, we continue to engage the public and get their input and refine this. So nothing is at all set in stone. It's more about putting the right pieces on the plan and then where they go on the plan. So overall, starting as one would enter the park, coming down Clackamas Drive, we have reorganized that to be a T intersection right at the park, just really formalizing that entry, views directly to the Clackamas River, organizing that sense of entry into the park. Right now, if you remember, Clackamas Drive kind of swoops around the corner, turns into Main Street, and then the entry is less significant. So as you enter into the park, the first parking lot shown there is number 7 is automobile parking. And then just briefly showing some sport courts, an expanded skate park to the east there. Continuing further into the site is the combination of boat trailer parking and automobile parking. Number 4 there on the Clackamas River shows the existing boat launch being used as a launch place for human-powered craft, so kayaks and canoes and stand-up paddle boards with some seating on both sides of the ramp there. The boat ramp is shown at the recommended location from the 2015 study, 350 feet downstream on the Clackamas River. And then going back towards, in the direction of the main entry there, just to the west of the main automobile parking lot, there's a public plaza, and that then transitions into a play area, that circular shape there located pretty central to the park, number 6,
Can you put
between
the
number
cursor
6
there,
and 2.
Jacob? I think you're talking about around 6, 2, 9, and 1. That where you are?
Yeah, that central round zone, there's a little bit of purple and some green, that's the play area, flanked by some shelters. And then to the lower right is a large open lawn area. And then kind of providing a backbone to this whole park is this extensive network of trails shown in the tan color, looping throughout the park and connecting to John Storm to the south and potentially under McLaughlin to the cove to the east.
That's not the,
Oh, and
should say.
the RV park is located across Clackamas Drive there with overflow parking and the RV dump station. So this
And
next
how many
slide
spaces does that have?
at the RV park,
Yeah, on this one,
20 or 18 in the RV park.
as opposed to some other options had 46 and,
There are 36 currently on site, and I think we were showing, if it was the full build out, there would be potentially 36 there on that off-site property. And there will be a slide that will get into more detail about the RV park.
okay. Does the T intersection, does it have, I was trying to figure out whether there was a traffic control device there. I mean, are you proproposing traffic control
I
device?
think we're envisioning that as a 3-way stop.
Okay, so there'd be
coming
like
from all ways.
allegedly
just-
stopping.
That's true. I mean, we could, use something like traffic teeth, I suppose.
People kind of like roll through them, I
Yes.
think, sometimes in
Yeah.
the park.
And just really, it's not on a curve anymore, but it's a very clear sense of entry. And so to get a little bit more specific about the parking, the overall footprint of the parking in this layout is a couple thousand square feet less, but we are increasing the number of automobile parking spaces by about 15, and the same for the boat trailer parking. There's about 15 more spaces. So there's about 90 auto spaces and 61 boat trailer spaces on site.
Not compact, I presume.
No,
The
regular size.
the 20 by 18, whatever they are, yep.
Yeah. And at this, I guess just to touch on that very quickly, at this point in the development, we leave a buffer, we're not down to the inches, so we have that level of expandability.
Oh, there's a lot of people with big trucks down there.
So next, just talking quickly about the network of pathways. So shown in this bright orange color are the looping pathways that connect to destinations within the park and then off-site, as well as some of the larger areas centrally located, I noted, just to the west of the main parking lot, a public plaza space between the parking and the play area, which, if you can imagine, used as a farmer's market, formal events or informal events using the shelters there. And then maybe they could be rented out for private events. And then also going towards the Clackamas River, some public plaza overlooking the river itself between the parking lot and the river.
I got a question regarding the area, what I guess it would be called kind of the open area, the riparian repair area by the river, essentially the area where it always floods. if you have a path, what do you do to mitigate destroying the path due to the floods? Or do you some concrete paths or blacktop or what? Because that area always, I mean,
Yeah.
after 30 years, it floods in 30 years.
And you see some of the pathway there that's been there a number of years degrade over time. But I think, yeah, definitely starting with the hardscape versus trying to do a chip path is
Yeah.
a step in that direction of making something that's going to last a lot longer. But it is just in some ways, something to keep in mind, an inevitability of the wear and tear that it takes in that location.
Or not even put a path there.
Yeah, and everything that we're showing is up above, the current rock zone, so it's not out of the floodplain by any means. The entire park is in the floodplain, but it's higher up.
There you go. That's the answer, Andy.
There you go. So it'll be underwater.
This next slide starts to,
Well, at some point.
We're going to have a swim fin rental.
there's several circles identified on the plan here that start to identify where art and interpretive signage could be located. I think that given the nature of this site, this is a highly important cultural site, very historic, been in use for thousands of years. I think that there is a lot of material that could be celebrated and noted on interpretive panels and signage, and these are just the beginning of suggesting where it could go and perhaps what it could look like, but the content to be developed, obviously. This next slide is important, showing in green here just the opportunities for mitigation as we come through with those paved trails or the impacts within, for instance, with the boat ramp, looking at mitigation of planting of native plants here, both trees and shrubs and ground cover, and really restoring that habitat that's there. And overall, we're showing about 8 acres of potential mitigation that could be planted outside of the open lawn and the existing trees. There's quite a bit of opportunity. And so then this next slide speaks to the sport court to the east of the main entry, showing a basketball court, but you could imagine it being pickleball, and looking for more feedback from the public as this moves forward, but just having a placeholder space for that. Those more active uses closer to the street in terms of noise and visibility, adjacent to the skate park. There's a good relationship there. A couple of additional gathering plaza spaces with benches and picnic tables. This next slide looks more closely at the play area. At this point, it's highly conceptual. These are just meant to represent play features. Nothing specific obviously has been selected. Real briefly, the ring shows a raised section kind of bermed up. This, as we mentioned, this entire park is in the floodplain, but making an effort to every couple feet really matters in terms of what the impact of the flooding is on an annual basis. Starting to show some shelters in the upper right image there and just what some of the play features could look like. And that this, again, when this moves forward, this is part of a whole nother public engagement process of working with the public, working with parents, any interested user groups to start to identify the character and the nature of what that play looks like. This next slide is speaking to the boat launch. And in the upper right image, looking at how we can enhance the existing launch with some seating, some artful seating, boulders or concrete pieces that really provides a space to watch the wave in use or to prepare to launch, or just if you come to the park to have a picnic lunch. It's a great place to get close to the water. And the bottom right picture of the boat launch is just a representational picture that shows some of the elements that would be a part of the launch at Clackamas Park. The floating dock and two boat launch lanes there. So one thing that came up in past meetings was the orientation of the boat launch, and this line work is based on the original hydrologic study done in 2015, and certainly given the age of that study moving forward, there'd be refinement to that, and we understand that there's the desire to look at different orientations, and definitely that's something that could be incorporated into that study, just seeing what the best fit for Clackamas Park is. And I think it's worth noting it's we had discussions with the Parks Department. It seems like a really good opportunity. It came up at the PrAC meeting as well to establish a committee with users of the park currently, maybe members from the commission, members from PrAC. So it's not just the agency doing a study and then providing what it would look like, but residents of Oregon City being very directly involved with that process. This shows the open lawn area to the west between the play area and the river. It's a couple acres of open lawn, great for both kind of seeing the image on the upper right, a formal event space, maybe a concert, but also just a place to go to the park and throw out a picnic blanket and have an informal gathering. This next slide is the RV park. Zooming in on that, these are the 18 spaces. Some feedback that we heard from last time was look at the circulation. We've provided routes to get to the dump station, which is the tan-colored square in the top of the image there, without traveling through the RV park itself. And the same would be true for using the overflow boat parking there. It's been separated out from the circulation of the RV park itself. And just to touch real briefly, we did some quick research on other RV parks in the area, and currently at Clackamas Park, it's 25 for a standard site and 30 for a riverfront site, which we're finding that is vastly lower than the going rate in the region for both on-river and off-river sites. So in looking at moving it, the RV park to this location, what this would provide is full hookups for folks, not just the dump station, but within each of the sites, and a greatly decreased amount of maintenance. This is on much higher ground, so it's not prone to that annual flooding. This is closer to the 100-year floodplain versus the 1-year floodplain. So with that, this steps back to the overall plan, and I think that at this point, that's our presentation about the new material, and I'll open it up for feedback.
So Steve, would you like to start us off? Do you have some questions or have comments that you'd like to bring to the fore?
Thank you very much. Yeah, Steve Williams, I appreciate it. I guess I'd just like to lead off and indicate that I really appreciate the effort that Langer Hansen has put into this over the course of all of the meetings that we have had. And I've participated in most of those, listened to a lot of public comment. I think they've done an excellent job of melding all of those concepts and ideas that we heard into the proposal you have before you here, which really meets a lot of the things that I heard from a lot of the public. A couple of things of interest to me. Obviously, I've been involved in the boat ramp issue. I think we've got the concept of having a boat ramp. I think there's still a lot of work to do to get that ramp engineered and put in place in a way that will make it last into the future. I also want to support, of course, the continued participation by individuals in helping as we move through the boat ramp and any other pieces of the park implementation that may come up. I like the aspect here of you've got good riverbank access, both in the Clackamas and on the Willamette. We have a lot of participation there in the park from people just being on the river and fishing on the river, and they've provided opportunities for that. I particularly like the kids' play area. I think that's going to be quite a advantage. Will get utilized a lot, and I really like the concept of the large grass area there and at the location where the existing RV park is. I think that opens up a lot of opportunities for a lot of different things that the community can enjoy by having that large grass area. So overall, I just want to throw my support behind the options you have here before you. I think it's a very good start. There's a lot of work to be done. certainly, a lot of expense and cost will be involved in implementing this, but that's something that can be worked on down the line. And I'd just like to throw my support behind what you see before you as a very good representation of what we heard as we went through all of the different public meetings that I attended. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to go next? Andy? Oh, Rocky, go ahead. We're just going to make this informal. So,
I also appreciate the work that's gone into this. I'm starting to be able to see, a utilization of the park, which I was concerned about with the new possible scenarios for the boat ramp. So I think my only concern, really, I'm not completely sold on moving the RV park up there at all, but I think that's one of the ways to deal with the trade-off of expanding the rest of the park use. Can we go back a couple slides to where it shows the actual RV park piece? I'm concerned with this because I go down to Clackamas Park frequently, as I think most of us do, and I know on more occasions than not, the lineup for the RV dump is beyond all the way down Main Street and around that corner. So if the entranceway to the RV dump is one of the only entrances to the RV park, no one can get in the RV park. And if that entrance right there that they're queuing is right at the exit at McDonald's, that is a disaster. I mean, it's already a traffic mess the way it is, but that would exaggerate. There's at any given time
and exacerbate.
16, there's at any given time 6 or 7 trucks, trailers in the middle of the street. You can't even get into the park. So I think that's going to be a real key. Clearly, the RV dump is a service and something that we want, but it's also where do you put it and how does it logistically work? Because I think the way it is now is complicated, but this could even be more complicated. So I'm concerned about that. I also love the idea that, we want to make this park conducive for large events. If we do that, I think it's crucial that any of the walkways are vehicle accessible in terms of for events. So having those pathways through the park, or at least some of the major pathways through the park being vehicle accessible for events. Knowing that I've done events in the park before where the Parks Department clearly wants to minimize vehicles on the grass, which you can't ultimately completely do when you're doing an event in a park, but any way that some of those main thoroughfares are at least accessible with bollards that are removed for events to get vehicles in there for vending and stuff like that, or setting up a stage. I'll bring up a stage. We have had, excuse me, talked about in the past not only having a permanent stage at the end of the Oregon Trail, but somewhere at Clackamas Park. That hasn't really come up on this in this plan, or really I haven't heard many people talk about it. There was logistic issues of building a permanent stage at the end of the Oregon Trail because it's also in a floodplain. I think they're even more so in this park, but I don't think that's crucial because you can, events can rent stages if they needed to too, and I don't think we have concerts in the park isn't going to move any time to this park. But I think the infrastructure, we need to think about if this, it clearly shows in our goals retreats about how much people appreciate public events and clearly people seeing this as a park that's utilized for that. So when we do paths and light poles through the park, where's the electrical outlets? I mean, is there electrical outlets to an entire park? Because there wasn't in Clackamas Park, and so actually some of the service clubs that do events in the park actually had to install electricity throughout Clackamas Park to even hold events. So I think those things need to be thought out so that it's not after the fact, oh, now we're going to have this big event here and we don't have electrical and we got to dig holes and try to put stuff in. It should all be considered as the whole plan. I think we're getting really close. I think, I'll never 100% agree with it all, because I still think the RV park being on the riverside is more conducive for the people that want to be there, but without moving it, we don't get to utilize the whole park. So I see the trade-off there. I wish there was a way to connect the RV park in a better way to Clackamas Park. Whether, I was trying to figure out, being on that Clackamas Drive and that corner of Main Street, that sits up way high. So I'm not sure the grading that would take place to actually have an intersection where the park goes right in on that corner, because it's a high level there. And the slope on Clackamas Drive into what is the current RV park is pretty steep. So there's probably some balance, cut and fill or something in there. I don't know if there's any way to, I know in parts it sinks down in the parking lot side where the current parking lot is, and there's kind of an upper, so in the current parking lot where the RV park is kind of illustrated to be in the future, part of that is scoured out, and then some of it's elevated too. And I know with flooding this could be an issue, but there's something to me to make that transition from getting from that parking lot to Clackamas Park easier, because a three-way stop will help that. Right now, there is no stop there, so for events or just general parking over there, it's complicated getting people back and forth. The stop and crosswalks might help, but I'd be curious if there would be any way to have a tunnel that goes underneath there and connects into the park, or some, other connection. I don't know. And I mean up as you get towards the end of McDonald's, where that, on one side, it's a super steep incline down, and it's not really dug out where the RV park is. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's just the way to connect those in a better way.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Definitely worth
Anyway, I think most of that, I think we're getting there, and I'm impressed by the work that's been done.
No, those are good points that you raised. The RV dump station, we'll definitely look at the circulation on that. I think there's a couple of ideas that come to mind of maybe not entering or exiting off of Clackamas Drive, for instance. And yeah, I think...
Get your mic over maybe a little further if you're going to look that way. Because I can hear you, but I don't know how it's picking up. Yeah, there you go. Awesome. Thank you.
And for instance, I was thinking, you were mentioning the pathways. Is that something we did over at TSW? Is key parts are the structural concrete that can be driven on, so that maintenance vehicles can get into the park itself. And I think this is a much bigger park, and we want to make sure that they can get farther afield, so to speak. So those are all great points.
Troy?
Yeah. Sorry, yes, I do have. When we had our last work session, there were two pieces of information that I requested, and I'm hoping we have those. One of those was the revenue from the current RV park compared to the projected revenue with this one. We're looking at increased fees, but we're looking at decreased spaces. So, and I'm sure the maintenance will change a little bit just because of location and dump station being with the RV park instead of, farther away. So that'll change. So hopefully we have those tonight. And then the other thing was the comparison of green space, the before and after. So we can at least let the public know that, visually it looks great and all, but it'd be nice to say we had this many acres and now we have this many acres.
Yeah.
Are we increasing? Are we decreasing? And I'm not suggesting a decrease is a negative thing, because we're getting other benefits with it, but I think we need to be transparent in what we are getting. So I don't know, do we have those tonight? I know I requested them last time.
They did. There was something in the document about the amount of green space. I recall you specifically talking about that.
Yeah, I can speak to that. But you were asking about the RV?
And I can speak to the RV
Go
park.
ahead. Do you want to go first?
So with the RV park, we did do a deep dive into the numbers, looking at previous years where we were open prior to the pandemic. So the years that we looked at were about 2018, 2019 was the last year we were open for that entire year. So minus any dump station revenue, the net revenue for that year was a little over $5,000. And then the year before that, the net revenue was around a little over $20,000 in revenue that we net after the expenses. So if you're looking at including the dump station money, we bring in about $20,000 to $25,000 in revenue associated with the dump station. But the caveat to the dump station, and why we didn't include it in our assessment, is because the dump station is donations. You don't have to pay. And people who stay at the RV park are not required to pay. That's just an amenity that we offer. But we did include those numbers in some of the projections as well to give that comparison. But that's where we stand right now in regards to the RV park. So we also itemized out all of the closures associated with flooding. So we know that with the transition to this new location, we have a lot of pluses associated with. The maintenance costs would go down considerably. Based on the research that we've done with other RV parks, they're charging 3 times the amount that we're charging at our RV parks for smaller space. So we have some opportunities to do some market research to make some adjustments to what we're charging for the spaces that we have. And we check a box by increasing the amount of green space that we have. So it could be quite more profitable by relocating it to this new location.
I would imagine also, on top of that, you'd be open more.
Exactly.
More often.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty much every winter, it's
Right.
closed for a month or two.
Yeah.
And then you got to go in and clean it all up.
And
Maintenance.
then close it again.
Yeah.
So the 5,000 and the 20,000, what years were those, did you say?
That was 2018 and 19 and I think what's 16, 17?
I've got 2018 through 19, 2019 through 20.
Yep.
So one of those is 5 and one of those is 20, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, and then you say net revenue, what are you pulling out between gross and net on the revenue?
Maintenance costs.
Okay, so the net
personnel
revenue
costs, that's all separated out from the revenue that's
So we
being
can call
brought.
that profit, or is there something else that comes out before profit?
That would be considered the
Okay.
profit.
Okay,
Right.
okay, and then we say other places are charging 3 times what we do. My suggestion is we raise our rates, maybe not 3 times, but did we do a projection on 18 spaces times that increased revenue?
Right.
To be able to compare to the 36 spaces? And what was that number of the projection?
We haven't done that projection as of yet. What we were calculating, the overarching calculation that we were saying is we would bring in probably close to 3 times as much as what we're bringing in right now with the adjustment in prices with the new location.
So when you say 3 times, you're talking about 3 times that 5 and that 20?
More than that, because you
okay.
don't have the maintenance costs associated with having
And
to
it's
close it
open
down.
12 months out of the
Right.
year.
Okay, I was thinking you meant just 3 times the rate, the nightly rate, but I see what you're saying. You're saying projecting 3 times
amount
the
of
profit,
revenue,
the amount of revenue, and therefore, the amount of revenue, and therefore maybe more than that times profit because of the
Yeah.
decreased maintenance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Should we consider charging for the dump instead of it being a voluntary, or?
I think,
Yes, we should.
Okay. Cost recovery, part of our cost recovery program. Yeah, there you go. Action item.
I agree, I think we should, and if you're renting the space, it should be included, and so the
Yes.
space
Yes.
rental would accommodate, yes, you're in this space and you get to dump, but if you're not
Right.
in a space, then, whatever we use, a coin-op machine or however it works, yes, I agree, I think it's nice that it's sort of free, but it's not really free.
Right.
Because of the cost.
Right.
And how often do we have to go in?
And fix it and,
Well, fix it and
it's pretty often.
do we have somebody that comes in and pumps it out?
Yes, and obviously the parks maintenance team deals with a lot of the maintenance themselves as well.
But they don't do the
don't
pump,
do the
yeah,
pump.
we have like some
Right.
company come in and do that, yeah.
Well, I
okay.
think you have to remember too, that most people using that dump station are not locals. Right, so it's not like we're charging our citizens. If we do charge, we're not charging our residents, because they're typically not going to pull their RV out of their driveway, go dump it and bring it back. I mean, there may be a few, but not usually.
Yeah,
So I think that's more of a reason to charge.
I know
Except
people,
for Andrew.
I know people who have done that.
Some do on
Yeah.
occasion, yes.
And I don't own an RV, but I have used the dump station in the past. Seriously, yes. We had an issue at our home and we needed to use so we were down there for a couple of weeks, about every 2 or 3 days.
Okay, too much information.
Yeah, I'm going to stop right there. Just saying we used it, so. And I kept saying, well, whatever it costs, you pay the fee to. So, yeah, I think, we have some concurrence on that. So, Joseph, you have?
Well, before we move on, we did have the green space question.
Yeah, and to speak to that, what we're showing here in terms of impervious space, the parking lot is a couple thousand square feet smaller than it currently exists out in Clackamas Park, providing more parking, but just in a more efficient way. So within the parking, in this, for instance, it's a little bit hard to see, but we have planting islands within the parking lot, and it's just a overall much more efficient layout. So that's a decreased amount of impervious, increased amount of green space. When we get to the trails, we are providing, I think right now it is...
It was 1.5 miles
Yeah,
of
we're
trails.
providing 1.5 miles, so we're in the neighborhood of 8,000 linear feet, and right now it's 4,700 in the park itself. So you could see that as being an addition of impervious space, but it's highly intentional and highly programmed coming in. And there's also the opportunity to look at pervious trail surfacing, like we've done recently at Hazel Grove. I think you saw that pervious concrete up there. So there's ways to mitigate it as we go, but it's a very intentional, it's a usable impervious surface.
Well, and I agree that visually it looks, you can see there's more green space, but for transparency, do we have a number? Before and after of acreage of green space? Something we could publish and say, this is what it is.
Yeah, we can definitely develop that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's just helpful.
Yep.
Otherwise, it's just pretty pictures, and some citizens will see it, some won't, and some will think that we got cut short. I mean, I'd love transparency. Let's just tell them what they're getting.
Exactly, and I think it's always nice to be able to explain it too. Here's what the number is, and here's what it means.
Okay, you're getting additional, maybe we're not getting additional RV spaces, but we're getting additional RV revenue. We're getting additional trails. We're getting additional green space. I mean, any more positives we can share would be great. There's certainly, as Rocky had pointed out, some negatives, and I think it's okay to address those. But if our positives is not a lot larger than that negatives list, we're going to have some issues, as we should.
No, that's a great point, and we'll definitely develop those numbers.
Just to follow up, Kendall, on what you were saying about the revenue from the RV park. As a finance guy, I'm curious what the driver of the variance was between, the 4X variance between the 20K and the 5K. Was it on the growth side, or was it more maintenance depending on the flooding and the additional cleanup that needs to be done year over year?
I would have to review that a little bit more closely to speak to what the actual difference is.
Sure.
And I would also have to see if it's based on the number of closures we had from the previous year
Right.
versus the year before.
Oh, makes sense. My other question or point, I brought it up during the PrAC meeting, the last PrAC meeting when we discussed the master plan. One of my concerns is making sure that both rivers are quite accessible when it comes to, getting down to the river in a safe way, and making sure the shoreline is improved or rehabilitated, access for fishing, access for just playing near the water or on the water, and what kind of considerations that you're making for that?
I guess the first thing that comes to mind in this is number 4, where we have the existing boat launch, and really looking at adding features to that zone. It plays into the access, but it also plays into accessing close, but not all the way to the river. For instance, seating right at the river's edge. So it makes it much more inviting than just the ramp that dives right into the river. And I think also at the edge, another really good opportunity on the Willamette side is at the edge of that whole open lawn space. Just
right.
making sure we pay really close attention to what happens right there where it transitions. There's the path the lawn, the path, and then the river. And
Right.
I think that's the place where a lot of people are going to want to go to the river. So
Exactly,
it's a
yeah.
really good opportunity.
Try to get through to Andy.
Yeah.
What? You're good. Well, we know that. Adam,
Well, okay,
he's spoken once, so.
okay, thank you.
I give everybody the first chance, and then we'll do the round robin.
Okay, thank you. So back to the finance, I was a little confused. Which year was the 20,000, which year was the 5,000?
2018, 2019 was $23,646.08. 2019 through 2020 was $5,760.93. One of the major differences is there was a reduction in revenue in 2019 and 2020, also personnel costs. There were some additional expenses, but those were the main drivers of the difference.
Okay, thank you. I would just say that I really, like everyone has already said, I really appreciate the work that has gone into this. Looking back at the 3 initial site plans that you guys presented to us a while back, I had taken notes on the little key of which things that I really wanted to make sure were in it, because there were certain things that were included in number 1, that weren't in number 2, that were in number 3, and all of the ones that I thought were crucial to have are in this final one. And so I really appreciate that. And as it relates to the RV park, I didn't realize that it was a net gain for the city, and so I appreciate those numbers because clearly people want that, and it's been a benefit to the city, and it hasn't been a drain on our resources.
Well, sort of.
Okay, well, yeah. But I really do like the idea of moving it over to the other side of Clackamas Drive. I understand, as Commissioner Smith said, that, one of the big draws maybe is that it's right on the water. But I think with how beautiful this is, there is still going to be a driver for people to want to come here, even though it's not necessarily right on the waterfront. And then looking at the increase in parking spaces, I can definitely see us being able to hold larger events down here. And having just spent the 4th of July in other cities, because we don't have an Oregon City one, which is a conversation to have down the road with our city-sponsored special events conversation. But having gone I went to Happy Valley and I went to West Lynn, and at their 2 huge city parks. And, I'm just really excited about what this is showing us, because this is going to be the crown jewel of our park system. And I really applaud the work that has been done here. Thank you.
Okay, you want to take one more
Yeah, I
bite of
had
the apple before I
one
say
thought that
something?
crossed my mind that's not on this map. I think you need to really look, so Main Street, well, how do I say this? The current road that goes down to the RV park, which basically heads towards the Willamette River from where number 1 is.
Kind of through
and
1,
goes
9,
straight
and 13
down
there.
towards where those trees are. At the end of that, right about where those 2 trees, is a giant outfall for sewage, right? That's where the platform is, and so that's right in the center of your big public plaza, which it's not going to move. So shifting that main public plaza may be something, or figuring out how to design around that platform that's there, because it's pretty substantial.
Is it smelly?
Well, I don't know, but it's not one of the things you want probably as a centerpiece to your park. So, so that's there, and it needs to be kind of considered how that's dealt with. It's basically right there at the end of that road, right where those 2 trees are. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a platform, and then
Is that shown
Right at the
on
edge of
any
the river.
Is that shown on any of the drawings?
Just to confirm, so if you almost drew a straight line from 1 to 9 to 13, where that touches
it's right
down.
about there.
Right there.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little up on the bank, but
Yes, yeah.
We probably should have that on
Yeah.
the plans.
it's in
for
that
sure.
what's shown as the grassy area, because it's pretty far up there. Yeah, it's right in there, I think.
Yeah, no seating next to that.
I mean, it's a platform that's fenced off. And
It's
then
a large
there's another
concrete structure.
Underground piece that comes into
Yeah.
the river.
Yeah, 'cause that is a great point. I'm wondering if maybe we can reach out to Wes. Because remember,
They are doing
They're
that
doing a
new
new, yeah.
primary diffuser that's going to be up by John Storm Park that's going to diffuse, and this
Right.
is really going to become the
Main.
break glass secondary
Right.
discharge
backup.
location. But maybe there's a way to look at if there's some way that could be incorporated into, people stand up on there right now as kind of a viewing platform.
Right, but it could be more of a,
Yep.
more of a lookout area, like kind of shown there by the 10 or whatever.
And I think, and the other thing I was, in the comments about, how Clackamas Drive and Main Street work and that connection and how do you safely cross it, would be, maybe something to consider is to look at, there's multiple ways that we can control traffic in that area, whether that's through design, speed limit reductions, making it very intentional, focusing on the pedestrian crossing rather than necessarily the vehicular, especially if you've got those 2 stop signs, being able to, essentially 3 stop signs at that 3 stop to slow down that traffic in that area.
Well, a couple of things that I noticed is that, number one, on the one that says final, I don't think it should say final. It should say draft.
Draft.
Final. Because looking at it, somebody's already pointed out to me, like, is that it? And I go, no, that hasn't been decided yet. Probably a bigger picture question before I get into the details is, so one of the things that I wanted to look at as part of this master plan is, what are the things that are being done well at Clackamas Park now? And have that list. And then obviously the converse of that would be, what are the things that are not working well? Third column, what needs improvement? And then I think a bigger question, or a couple, so what do we really need at Clackamas Park, and what do we want at Clackamas Park? And I think the survey has kind of answered some of those questions, so that's answered. Then the other question is, what is at Clackamas Park that is being replicated at other parks that gets to my question of, do we really need that there if we've got other parks that cover the same sort of issue? So what I'm leading to is, if Clackamas Park is a regional park, which it is, what do we really need it to be? What is the key feature? And I think you brought up one of the things is that if you'd like to have large events there, then we need to look at how we shift some of the things so that that can be if that's what the desire is. Again, we've got the needs and then we've got the wants. So, I'm trying to look at it from the standpoint of, we cannot have this park be all things to all people. It has to be able to focus on, is it 3 things? Is it 2 things? What are the things that we really want this park to do well? And we kind of focus on there. So we've got, sports courts, we've got the skateboarding thing, we got the this, we got the. In some ways, all of that is wonderful, but it might be too much, if you understand what I'm saying. We already have the skateboard facility down there, and I think that's, we don't want to change that. We should keep that. From my own personal viewpoint, I support, and I think we talked about this at our last meeting, I support expanding the RV park and having it have more spaces so that we can capture more revenue, because I think that the need is there. I think that if we build it, they will come, and I agree we should charge for the dump station. And maybe, as you suggested, Troy, that we look at what you're looking at, what the market is, and maybe, let's say the market is $50 for space. Let's say we make ours $45. So we're just a little below. We're not at the top. We're not at the bottom, but we're just a little below that. So people say, oh, well, we can go to Clackamas Park and it's only, $45. Whereas if we go to Hillsborough, blah, 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 that's $55. Sometimes people aren't doing that comparison, but if we kind of keep it just a little below that, and definitely charging for the dump, and including, so if you're renting a space at Clackamas Park and it's $55, then it's whatever it is in addition, you get we charge a little bit more to cover the dump cost. So that's a couple of things I was looking at. I kind of go back and forth on the boat ramp, but, I'm not going to say whether I think that is a need. I think I've heard from enough people in this community that they want to keep the boat ramp. My concern is that, are we throwing good money after bad? Because how many more years will it be down the road, when none of us are here, 20 years, are we looking at the thing getting scoured out again? And so after we had our discussion with the people from the State Marine Board, I can see, I'm leaning more towards, yes, I understand there's value there. There is value there. I'm not a boater, but I've been out on boats with people who go down there. So the other thing that I was looking at is, I'm not supportive of the overflow parking being to the by the RV park, and here's why, because I think that is it's inherently a little bit of a conflict, and the property that we still own on the other side of McDonald's, is that down in the little, that temporarily that could be used, and I think when we had the last big fair thing there, we had people parking there. A little bit we used for parking, as I recall.
So, but
I recall some kind of on the perimeter. I mean, Tony, you're rolling your eyes, but that's okay. Maybe it's not a good, but anyway, it's something to consider. But I do agree with you about the queuing, that's a problem. I was just at McDonald's this morning, and believe it or not, there was no queuing. I mean, there were a couple of RVs behind me coming down Clackamas Drive, and I turned into McDonald's, and then when I left, they weren't queuing. I mean, but that was about maybe 10:30, 11 o'clock. So there wasn't that queuing, but I could see looking down that the park looked like it was kind of full.
Yeah.
So maybe we need to take another look at that and how the traffic gets in and out of there, and maybe there's room to expand over, so maybe there could be a little bit of a queuing lane, but once you're out of the queuing lane, we just don't allow that. I do like the idea of making it more pedestrian-centric when you get to the park, and maybe there's a way that we can kind of prevent people from trying to park on the lawns and stuff by maybe doing a rolled curb of some sort, or something that would be perceived as an obstacle that you don't want to roll your car over because it might get stuck. Because I don't think we need to have cars, messing up the lawn. But I think that moving this further down the road, and again, going back and taking a look at particularly the area around 5, 14, and 7, not the parking at 7, but 5 and 14, trying to figure out, what do we want there versus what do we need there? Is that a replication of something else we have in another park that maybe we can, but 5 is the skate park, right?
yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so we can leave that one pretty much alone, so but yeah, I think the way you've got the parking, I think makes sense. I think another thing you and I talked about earlier in another work session was, you talked about grouping, and I think Kurt might be able to help with this. He's looking, we were talking about trying to prohibit people from going off the bank in the areas where we were looking at replanting with native plantings, because, people always get tempted, oh, let's just go over here in these bushes, it'll be private, we'll be in our own little we want to try to kind of prohibit that. Maybe we plant a lot of Oregon grape, because boy, get that on your legs, you don't want that. But we need, and signage and information's going to help, like, we're restoring this area, please don't tromp on here. And then let me ask the question that people always ask, is that, what are we doing about people and their dogs running or getting into the riparian areas and pets? And, I don't want it to be onerous to people with pets, but we all know that there are people who are not responsible with children, and they're not responsible with pets, so it works both ways.
Yeah. It's not an easy one, but we have that experience ourselves.
So this is not an off-leash park, I presume?
No, it is not.
So it's on.
Yes.
Well, I mean,
That is an issue at this particular
yes, and
park.
I have seen that when I've been down there, you're wandering around, you're walking along, and all of a sudden somebody's dog comes flying by, and you're like, where is the owner? So.
Thank you. So I will say, first off, when you were talking about the boat ramp, I'm hopeful that some of us here will be here in 20 years.
You probably will. Wait a minute, let me think here. Yeah, I'll still be here in 20 years.
Yes,
Okay, yeah.
yes.
You could help me in with my walker.
As it relates to what you were saying about not wanting to have too many things, I totally agree with that. And
Try not to be all things.
trying not, yeah, exactly. And so when I think about what I want this to be like number one for, apart from, nice green space and access to the river, is I want us to be able to have a place where we can have large city events. And so when it comes to the RV park area, I think it's important that maybe it's not in that spot and maybe it's at that other property you were talking about, but I do think it is important that we have the necessary parking if we want to be able to attract large crowds. And so just thinking about this Thursday where we have our concerts in the park at the EOT, that's a huge problem. And I just want us to be able to be thinking ahead, because with this new configuration of the RV park, even though it's less spaces, it's going to be open year-round, hopefully. So hopefully the people who want to be able to get there, and with changes in demand, if we were to increase the prices, hopefully it would be manageable with the amount that's there. But again, I'm open to having, more dialogue about if we can configure other overflow parking spots in other areas.
All right, do you have enough to go on? We're at the
This
bewitching
is all
hour.
good feedback, yes.
Great feedback.
Yeah, thank you.
What's Roger doing on there?
Is that Roger?
No, he heard us.
Hi, Roger. Come say hi. He's going, talk to the hand.
I kept him in reserve back here behind me.
I haven't called
Thank you, Steve.
I caught him.
It was nice to see him, say hello. All right, well, thank you, everybody, and I look forward to us having another conversation about this as we move through the process, and I really appreciate your coming in tonight and breaking some bread with us, and we hope to do it again. Anyway, I will adjourn the work session.